So students, now we are going to look at creating the Lambda function and making the code into the Lambda function in such a way to write the things in DynamoDB database. So the Lambda function is going to be the microservice and which can be triggered from API gateway as well. And the DynamoDB is going to be the NoSQL database which is going to act as a database for us in this scenario, and the code to write in this database is going to present in the Lambda function. So first we will go to the Lambda function. So I'm having a Lambda function here which is a fun1 function, and there is no trigger is being added here and there is no destination is being added. But the API trigger is being given to this Lambda function from the API console. So now the trigger for the API gateway to the Lambda function is being added here. Now I am having a function which can print just hello from Lambda and welcome, which is a Node.js based one. So I will delete this function and we will have our own function to put the code in the NoSQL database DynamoDB. So this is the code to make this possible. So let me explain this code. So now AWS require AWS SDK. This is the package import statement which is essential for communicating with the DynamoDB. And then the next line is speaking about the region where I am working with. I am working with actually the AP South 1 region. So it have to be AP and then South 1. Then the actual function is starting here, the event handler. So the function starts at this place and it ends at this place. So this is the function of event handler which will trigger from the API gateway or which we can trigger manually as well. So here I am just calling the other function called create message and I am passing the request ID. You can able to see I am calling it here and I am passing the request ID. The request ID is the one which will generate automatically. So the ID value is going to be the unique value which is going to pass to this create message function. So once this function is being called, it will come, the controller will come to this part, the create message function. Here in the create message function, I am mentioning the table name in the DynamoDB as sample and the primary key as the ID. And then the other field, we can have number of other fields. In this example, only one other field after the primary key, that is message. And in this message, I'm just printing my name. And then after this function execution, it will come to this then part. Here it will return the response as status code 201 success. So once the function is successfully executed, we will get the status code 201 and we can able to see the message which I given in the table DynamoDB. So now I want to deploy this function to save it. I am deploying it. But before clicking on the test button, so I need to have a table in the name of sample in DynamoDB. So let me to go to DynamoDB now. So here we will type DynamoDB in the search box. We will open the DynamoDB. So here we will create a table for our purpose. While creating the table name should match that. In our case, it is sample and S is capital. And the partition key is the ID. The key name is the ID and it is of the string type. And there is no short key in our case. Now, better to go with the customized settings for the table and the DynamoDB standard one. Then in the capacity calculator, here the average item size is set as 1 KB. Per package, it can be up to 4 KB. That means per packet, it can be up to 4 KB. And this is the number of read unit and write unit which this table is supposed to have. And this is the method of read and write. The eventual consistent is the least one and which we are going it now. And the write is going to be standard write. The other one like transactional, and here in the read, the strong and transactional read will consume more number of units for a single packet. Now the read and write capacity settings. Here it is going with provisioned and the auto scaling should be off, and we are going to go with only one read and one write capacity. So just change it to 1 and off the auto scaling. And we are not going to create any global index or local index to reduce the number of fields. Here we are having only 2 fields, so just we will go with that 2 fields and we will create the table. So now the table is being creating. Once it is created, it will be ready for our operation. Now the Lambda function need to access the DynamoDB table. That means it need the permission. So you need to assign a role for Lambda function to get the data inserted into DynamoDB database. Now, where to assign the role? So you have to go to the configuration. In the configuration, in the left side, you can able to see permissions. In the permission, there is a role name already associated with this Lambda function. Just open this in another tab. Go to that role and add the permissions. So now the role is been opening. So it is opened. So now you can able to see add permission button here and attach the policy. So what policy we are going to attach means DynamoDB based one. So I'm going to give DynamoDB full access. So attach the policy. So once the policy is get attached, the Lambda will get the permission to insert the data into DynamoDB. So now the Lambda code supports the insertion and Lambda has the permission to insert, and DynamoDB is having the table which is active to insert. So now you click on the test button here. So it will trigger the Lambda function manually and you can able to see the status code 201 here. That means the data should be successfully inserted in the table. We will check that. We'll explore the table items and you can able to see here the data is being successfully inserted, what we inserted. And we know that our Lambda is being associated with API gateway, and my API gateway URL is going to be this one, which I will give it one more time. So now you can able to see I can able to trigger my Lambda function from the browser, which is global. And the same in DynamoDB table, which you run the test again, you can able to see the table is having 2 times the same data. but the ID value is unique. So the objective of this session is creating Lambda function and writing the data in DynamoDB. So we created the Lambda function and we made the code which is based on Node.js to write it in to write it in DynamoDB, and we created a table in DynamoDB. Then finally we assign the role to Lambda function which can put in the data in DynamoDB, and we tested it. It is inserting, and in addition to that we had a API gateway trigger which is also doing the same job. That's it. Thank you.